Sup fam, it's Facepan. So as you can see, I no longer have a mullet. If you were subscribed for the mullet, then I'm sorry. I don't have the mullet anymore. I got rid of it. And it mostly, the mullet was an inside joke with myself that I had for many years. And it's fucking hot here. Hong Kong is fucking hot. Someone needs to turn the AC up in Hong Kong because it's stupid. It's stupid how hot it is. I don't know why the Asians let it get so hot here. I think they should fix it. But anyway, last week I was listening to Molyneux had a video which was his first Discord Q&A response thing. Faraday Speaks calls in. And let's go ahead and listen to it and go through it. Now, just to catch everyone up, Faraday Speaks made his video. I responded to it. I responded to that video at face value, just assuming that he truly believed the things he was saying, and I made my response video. Later on, I looked into what other people were saying about him, and then I thought, you know what? Yeah, I think he is fake and he is a troll, and I fell for it. I'll own that. I'm not the irony master. I don't think so. I like to assume that that they genuinely think what they think when they say what they think, because that's the way I am. I play games with my hand revealed. I don't try to play sly, manipulative games. I just say, here's what I think, here's the terms I like to use, and I throw it all out there. Because I legitimately believe that I have a winning deck. And it's so winning and it's so good that I can win even if I play it badly. With this response, I'm going to be taking Faraday Speaks at face value. However, I'm still a little bit preponderance of the evidence wise, I'm still thinking he's a troll, in which case, Godspeed, whatever the fuck ever. But I'm willing to play along. I'm willing to play along because it's still rhetorically very interesting and very informative. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Let's just jump into it.
Hi bitch, hi bitch, hi bitch, hi bitch, hi bitch, hi bitch.
Okay, so next question we'll take from Faraday Speaks. Faraday.
Just look at that cringe. That is dial 11 cringe from Molyneux at the very moment that he realizes that the person he will now be speaking to goes by the name Faraday Speaks.
Are you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Stefan. So I used to be a big fan of your...
Back away from the mic just a little bit. Sorry, it sounds like you're Linda.
Way better now?
Yeah, okay. You're deep throating
sorry
that
about
baby.
that. Didn't mean to...
See, and the fact that he sounds so nervous and is speaking so quickly and is clearly, obviously, deep-throating his microphone, this to me suggests that it might not just be a big troll. I'm going to put that in the maybe he's for real column, just to be charitable.
Blow up your ears there.
It's all right.
Okay. So I used to watch your videos a lot, Steph. I recently made a video, my descent into the alt-right pipeline, where I came out of right-wing politics, and you were a big driving force for me going into that side of politics. But I wanted to come here
hang
today
on.
and
Sorry,
ask
and
you...
I'm sorry to be annoying. I just, and I'm not trying to break your flow or anything.
Oh no, that's not.
I have no idea what right-wing politics means. So if you could just explain that to me a little. I mean, everybody has their own way of looking at it.
And Molyneux is obviously very aware that this comes off as annoying to many people. But if you're somebody who's libertarian at all, then you understand why he has to clarify this definition. And it's going to be very, very illuminating. And I think that this is something that people really don't put enough weight in. You have to define terms when you're going to have any sort of conversation. And mostly this is because leftists have really muddied the definition. And the reason I place that blame squarely with leftists has to do with cone theory. On the political spectrum, it's much more useful to look at it as a cone. If you're using the political trichotomy, you just roll up your political trichotomy, and then you orient them in terms of small versus large government, and then you'll have a cone. And basically, what happens is you acknowledge the fact that on a one dimensional linear political spectrum, there's multiple ways and multiple different dimensions in which a government can become large. And therefore, in order to chart this, you'll need to use a cone because you're going to have different directions to go in the more choices you make as to how you see government's legitimate role playing out. Whereas when you go to the right, you only have things to take away until eventually you're at this minarchist tip, which eventually will lead you to anarcho-capitalism. And this is why people who find themselves further down the cone, further to the left, what they do is they look at somebody at the other end of the cone. And when I say the other end, I mean the other end of the circle. So they're still equally as far down left, but they can look across the circle and then see, well, that person's the opposite of me. When in reality, we're just looking at two different forms of leftism. And because not enough people are able to unpack the political spectrum in this way, we have to clarify this. And you're going to see immediately that it's a very important question that Molyneux has just asked him.
Oh, yeah. So I found your content and I basically agreed with your libertarian philosophies, became a libertarian, and then kind of drifted down towards conservatism, and then finally settling around civic nationalism, what I would have described as alt-right. And then from there, I came back out, and I guess I would call myself a progressive now.
And you can hear how arbitrary it sounds. So I went through all these different stages and then at some point watched a Destiny video which debunked some points that the alt-right makes, allegedly, points that he can't really explain himself. And then because of this, he just magically just regurgitates all the way back up through all of it.
And what is civic nationalism for you?
Civic nationalism would have been a strong national identity, strong borders, basically like a more concentrated form of conservatism. I would have held very socially conservative views. And I really saw it as a way to get towards a free and open society.
I'm so sorry.
But
I apologize. And I'm not, again, I really don't want to break your flow and we will get to your central point.
Yeah.
So strong borders, I mean, can you think of countries in the world that, outside of some of the Western countries that don't have strong borders? I mean, there's hugely strong borders in Japan and Saudi Arabia, and Israel has a wall around itself.
Oh, yes. So I would have looked up to a country like Japan, for example. I saw that as my model for the society that I.
So it's not because there's no philosophy in that. You could have, what else has strong borders is North Korea, right? I mean, they've got a 54th parallel,
there was a
right?
philosophy to it. Yeah, no, it wasn't. I didn't want an authoritarian government within that.
Okay, but when it just comes to having strong borders, that describes most of the countries in the world, regardless of how we would morally judge the content of their political system. So I'm not sure what civic nationalism means other than border enforcement, which most countries in the world pursue.
Oh, yeah. So I would have criticized countries like Germany for bringing in, and specifically during the 2015 migrant crisis, I was a big critic of.
Right. Okay.
So things like that, I would have criticized pretty heavily. What I saw as liberal socialist policies, I would have criticized pretty heavily. I basically wanted a libertarian society, but I didn't think that was possible as long as immigrants were coming in, voting, taking welfare, things like.
Well, to be more specific, right? It's not a question of immigration. Sure. It's not a question of immigration. It's a question of how do the immigrants who come into the West tend to vote? And the answer, as we know, is that they tend to vote strongly for the left. They tend to vote for more and more bigger government and higher taxes and more social programs and, in general, socialism. I mean, that's why the socialists want to bring them in. It's because it's a voting base, right? So it's not just a question of immigration, like immigration good or bad. It's a question of the current general post-1965 switch to immigrants from the third world is really the only thing that's propping up the left in the West at the moment.
Do you have evidence that the left is doing this for?
Oh, I'm sorry, I think I just lost you there. The left is doing this for what?
Do you have evidence that the left is doing this in concert for that reason, to promote?
And this is where the conversation really kind of goes off the rails. At this point, Caleb has basically conceded that the definition he was trying to build of civic nationalism was not a very useful one. So instead, he tries to define it by saying, well, here's a specific instance of something that I would oppose. He also described how this links into a libertarian view, which is that if you have people coming into a country who then vote for anti-liberty policies, then that's going to cause a problem for libertarians. And of course, Molyneux restates this as the case, but instead of actually trying to contradict that argument, the actual claim to fact, instead what he wants to focus on is, well, can you prove that liberals are doing this intentionally? Which, of course, the answer is you can. You can prove that they're doing it intentionally, because Democrats used to be very pro borders. They used to be very pro or very anti, illegal immigration. And it wasn't until after it became obvious to them that they could use this as a way of buying votes that they began to double down on these sorts of policies. So the proof is in the pudding. It's really not a very far-fetched claim that Molyneux is making here. And it seems to me that Caleb is just trying to find any chink in the armor that he possibly can, and then what he can do after the fact is reframe the debate in order to pretend that was what he was going for. When in fact, this conversation really just kind of started out as, him giving his whole shtick. He's a walk backer, and Molyneux, is just kind of trying to unpack and understand it and get him to kind of clarify his position along the way. But now he's trying to make it about this point of, can you prove that liberals are doing this intentionally? Which, first of all, I'm not sure why that matters. If the result is the same, I'm not sure the intention really matters. Welfare is very evil. I don't think that every single person who supports welfare understands the consequences of it. They're not getting their stated intentions out of it, obviously. That doesn't really change the moral character of it, except that I suppose if it is intentional, that makes it just a little bit more evil. But that seems like kind of a win-more situation. It seems like this really isn't a very important thing to be going into, but well, we'll see where it goes.
Wait, are you asking me if the left likes bringing in people who vote for them?
Yeah, do you have evidence that is the reason that they're bringing people?
I don't understand the question. Do you think that the left doesn't know?
Well, you're saying that the motivation...
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Do you think that the left doesn't know that the current demographics of immigrants vote for the left?
Well, I wouldn't say that even liberals, for example, if you look at the United States, I wouldn't even say that liberals support socialism unless you're going to paint socialism with a broad brush. But if you're going to say that they are bringing people in for this grand plan to institute socialism, I'd like to see...
Well, no, hang on. We didn't get to the grand plan to implement socialism. So, for instance, in England, you have imams that are commanding their followers to vote for the Labour government, right? Do you think that the Labour government or that the left in general does not know that the vast majority of Muslims are going to vote for the left? Or do you think that the Democrats don't know that the vast majority of blacks, say, are going to vote for the Democrats? Do you think that they're unaware of these things?
They might be aware of that, but do you think that's the plan? You think there's a strategy? I'm asking for evidence for the plan or the strategy. Just because they might be aware of that doesn't mean that it's a top-down thing, right?
Again, I'm not sure what you mean. So let's say, for instance, if we look at Hispanics in the U.S. very significantly vote for Democrats, right? So if, let's say, the Democrats were to suggest closing the border to the south, which I know a lot of Hispanics do agree with, or simply enforcing existing immigration laws. I know a lot of Hispanics do agree with that. But there is a significant number, of course, of Hispanics who would be upset by that because they want more family members to come in, or they want to be reunited, or whatever it is, right? And so I don't know what you're looking for in terms of, do I think that there's some secret memo written in the blood of newborn piglets or something? It's like, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that... It just seems like it's the
intuition on your part. It's not really something that you've been able to prove. It's just kind of this intuition. And then I would further say that liberals are not in support of socialism. I mean, you've seen the criticism that even AOC and Bernie Sanders get in the United States, and this is because the corporate Democrats are not in support of this. They're not in support of even universal health care. So I don't see how that you can describe those people as socialists. They're typical neoliberals. And then once again, I would say, do you have evidence that they're bringing people in as a voting bloc? So what would you respond to?
All the people that they're bringing in are a voting bloc. I don't know what you I don't know what you mean in terms of evidence.
And the reason he can pretend that this distinction matters is because what happens is it's a boiling frog situation. The United States of America has been a socialist country for a century now. And we've forgotten this. Socialists, self-identified socialists, are people who want to pile on additional socialist programs on top of the ones that we already have. The Republicans are socialists, the neoliberals are socialists, and the socialists are also socialists. And this is how they get away with pushing further and further leftist policies, as they say, oh, well, we haven't achieved what we want yet, so therefore we can add more to it. And they just completely erase the fact of the status quo, which is that, yes, all of these Western countries are socialist countries. And I think that people on the right, they need to stop compromising with these people. And they need to start saying, you know what? If you're going to start saying and putting on the table reparations for things like slavery, let's put reparations on the table for the welfare state. Let's put reparations on the table for the war on drugs. Let's put reparations on the table for all of the socialist crap that every single socialist, whether they identify as right-wing or not, that they've been pushing down our throats for the past century. I think that we need to take a stronger stance, and we need to take a more principled stance. And the problem is that too many, especially like evangelical Christians, they're very, very pacifist, and that doesn't work in politics. They need to either check out of politics. You know, if you're going to take one Pascal's wager, don't take the second one. Don't take the reverse Pascal's wager. Check out of politics and let people who are actually principled and actually want smaller government, you know, let them take over, because we don't need this sort of socialist infiltration of the right. It doesn't help anything. And absolutely, every single neoliberal is a socialist, and just because you're even more socialist doesn't mean that the non-socialist magically become socialist. But more importantly, in regards to this actual exchange here, the people coming in are a voting bloc. They're voting for the Democrats regardless of if it's AOC or some neoliberal. So this entire tangent here is moot. So now we're second level of the discussion not being relevant to the original topic.
I mean, you know the simple example, right? Hang on. So the simple example is this, right? If you want to look at a persecuted minority, you would look at the whites in South Africa, where you have political leaders saying one bullet, one settler, meaning the whites. You have political leaders in South Africa saying kill the Boer, which is kill the whites. You have the police turning a blind eye to farm murderers. This is a persecuted minority. And yet if white South Africans try to get into America or Australia or other countries, the leftist politicians will push against them. Why? Because they're conservatives in general and they're Christians. So, you know, you can
this
say,
is
well,
a lot
where's
of
the secret
inference.
memo?
It's a lot of inferences, though.
I'm sorry?
It's a lot of inferences that you're making. Now, I agree that if whites in South Africa are being oppressed specifically, then yes, we should give them refugee status. But you're making a lot of inferences here.
That's not an argument. You know that, right? Saying I'm making a lot of inferences.
Well, you haven't made, but you're not making an argument either. You're just making inferences to say that this is likely their strategy.
And there we have Molyneux's catchphrase, not an argument. This is actually a great example of that, a great case study in the not an argument meme phenomenon. So, the questions here are, was Molyneux's point not an argument, as Faraday Speaks has implied? And were Faraday Speaks' points not an argument, as Stefan Molyneux has implied? Now, an argument, of course, is when you have a conclusion and at least two premises, right? If you have only one premise and a conclusion, that's basically a tautology. That's just to state something is equal to itself, which, as stupid as that sounds, tautologies are often extremely profound. My motto is more is more. That is a tautology. It is also my maxim and my way of living. It is my semi-humorous, but also unironically taken to heart spin on A is A, which was Ayn Rand's take on Aristotle's law of identity, that a thing is equal to itself. And of course, anybody who utilizes a concept or identifies a thing, which is to say, literally everyone, is beholden to this law of identity, and therefore you can't deny that my motto, more is more, is wonderful and amazing without being a very, very silly person. So, let's look at Molyneux's argument. Is it an argument, in fact? We start off with this idea that you have immigration from places and in situations where the immigrants in question, the so-called refugees, tend to vote leftist, and they are embraced, they are welcomed with open arms by people in Europe. And then he is contrasting this with the white South African Boers who predominantly would be voting not leftist, and is saying that, look, they are not afforded the same asylum status that these other refugees are. Now, for something to be an argument, all that you need is for premises, if true, to lead to your conclusion and to justify your conclusion. If you want to say that the premises are false, that doesn't mean it wasn't an argument, right? Not an argument refers to the structure of an argument. Does it have validity? Validity refers to the form. So when you're dealing with something and wondering whether or not it's an argument, you accept all the premises as true and then see if just the basic logical structure holds up. And when Molyneux says not an argument, it's an indictment on society. He's saying that we're not even at the point as a society where addressing things in terms of empirically verifiable, like intersubjectively verifiable phenomena, that's even on the table yet. We literally aren't making arguments. Now, Molyneux throws this accusation out regarding Faraday Speaks when he just says, that's just an inference, that's just an inference, that's just an inference. You know, I don't know if anyone's really sure what he means by inference, except that that's a premise and I don't like it. Now, I'm going to be really charitable. I'm going to try to package that into an argument, right? So the idea is that somehow Molyneux has not provided a 100% airtight, complete proof of what his conclusion is. However, to say that's just an inference, to me, this seems like it's more of a criticism of the level of empirical justification behind each premise. And to me, this doesn't really justify the claim, his no you claim of this not being an argument. I think that Molyneux has very clearly made an argument. If you want to argue that it's a bad argument, I think that you have to at least acknowledge that it is an argument. And to say that's just an inference, I think that right now, colloquially, he's just using the phrase inference in order to diminish the premises of Molyneux's argument, in order to suggest that, no, these things aren't true. Or at the very least, they're not true to the degree to which you need them to be true in order for your conclusion to follow from such premises.
Anyway, you want to get to the question that I had?
Well, no, I'm still a little baffled by this one. It's sort of like saying, well, do you have proof that Amazon, do you have proof that they want to make money? Do you have proof that they try and keep their cost of production lower than their cost of sales? Do you have this all written down? It's like, that's how it works. That's how the system works. I mean, the fact that the left switched immigration to a group that votes consistently for the left, you're saying, well, do you have the memo? And it's like, I don't need a memo because I understand how human motivation works.
All right. So if you guys are all right with us, I'm going to move it around to just get some more questions.
Well, hang on. I'm happy if he wants. He said I didn't get to his question, so I'm happy if he wants to. If he wants to ask his question.
Sorry, Steph. We can talk at another time, maybe. But
shoot me an email. I'm interested in what you have to say, and it's a fascinating topic. So please do shoot me an email. But yeah, okay. If the mods want to move on to someone else, I will. I bow to the mods. They are the gods.
Okay. Can I get my question in, mods?
No, go ahead, guys. If you're still interested in this stuff, we can.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So, you were a proponent of the white genocide theory regarding immigration in European
I'm
countries.
sorry. Can you just? I'm really sound like I'm being annoyingly obstructive, but you just cut out there at the beginning. If you start again.
Yeah, sorry. I have a bad connection right now. We good?
Yeah.
Okay. You were a proponent on your YouTube channel of the white genocide theory regarding immigration in European countries.
Can you tell
Recent
me?
attacks.
Sorry. Can you give me a quote? I'm not sure what you mean. What if I said?
I mean, I could go back to your videos, but I specifically remember you using that phrase, white genocide. But anyway,
No, hang on,
if I could just get
dude,
to the question here.
Hang on, be responsible, for Christ's sake. Be responsible. If you're going to start bringing up something like white genocide theory with me, but you don't
Lauren
have
Southern specifically has a video called The Great Replacement.
Still talking. If you're going to bring up a phrase like white genocide with me, which you know is a massive charged phrase, right? And you don't have a single quote, but you think you remember me using the phrase? Come on, man. Be responsible about your public.
Okay, I will source. I will source it for you if you needed to, but we don't have time for that right.
Okay, well let's move on, mods, and maybe if people want to bring up highly contentious issues with me, I'm going to need a little bit more than I think I heard you say the phrase once on a show. Be responsible in your public proclamations, and be responsible. That's the least that you should do in such a charged political environment. All right, let's move on to the next question.
When asked to provide information regarding this claim that Molyneux was a proponent of the white genocide claim, he said, well, Lauren Southern has a video called The Great Replacement. And I'm not sure that this even demonstrates that Lauren Southern was a proponent of the white genocide claim. And, to me, I don't know, I'm offended on a couple of levels. There's this basic level that Molyneux's operating on, that he's saying that, you know what, like, you need to bring a direct quote so that we can actually look at the context. And that's totally fair. It may be the case that Molyneux has actually used the term. I don't recall him using that term personally, but that may be the case. And even if that is the case, we need to see the actual context to see what he meant by it. And I think that Molyneux has always been very careful and even-handed on that topic. So I don't think that there's anything to suggest that that's really fair to just characterize him as, quote-unquote, a proponent of white genocide. You know, if he wanted to have an honest conversation regarding that topic with Molyneux, instead what you would do is you would ask an open-ended question and then let him go with it where he wants. You'd ask him, do you believe that there is a white genocide or some sort of soft genocide that targets, ethnically white people, happening in the West, right? So something that's open-ended enough that he can kind of approach it however he wants to. Instead, he wants to say, you are a proponent of this, and then there's some question to follow, right? And of course, Molyneux stops him and says, like, you need to let me know what you mean by saying I'm a proponent of something. And that's perfectly fair, and it's very vigilant, too. I think that people aren't very vigilant by default regarding these sorts of things, and I think that what Molyneux demonstrated here was a really good sort of rhetorical self-defense technique. But at the same time, I want to take this a step further, because I don't think that it should be controversial to discuss the concept of white genocide. I would not personally identify as somebody who believes that there is an orchestrated sort of pattern of white genocide occurring. But I would say that we absolutely need to let everything out onto the table. I think that people should be allowed to show their hands and to say what they really think and to be open and honest about it. Because, I don't think that it's fair to diminish those concerns, even if you think it's ridiculous. And I do think that there is kind of a global issue of, if you look at white populations, it does seem like they're kind of backed into a corner in a lot of ways, and that their own politicians and their own governments, their own people, are just voting for policies that continually seem to allow people that are non-white to outbreed and essentially replace them. Like, I think that there is a legitimate conversation to be had there. And I think that when you say that shouldn't even be allowed to be discussed and that it's taboo, you're only going to contribute to even more polarization regarding that. Now, personally, I don't really care that much which races prevail and don't prevail, to me, that doesn't really matter. I've never really felt a strong sense of racial identity. But at the same time, it seems like that's a very distinctly white thing to say, which kind of seems to be the root of this issue, is that white people seem to be totally fine with things working out naturally however they may, whereas people of other races don't seem to have this same attitude. And we should be allowed to question the degree to which there's a predatory aspect, where people are seeing that as a weakness to be exploited. Because if you're going to have like this pacifist, very peace-loving sort of idea, well, you're going to be the number one kind of loser if you're the only one that's playing by those rules. So the question is, can we truly all play by these rules? And if not, you know, why shouldn't we allow white people to defend themselves, at the very least, by dissociating with groups that they feel are detrimental to them? I don't think that that's really a far-fetched claim at all. I understand that it's a socially unpopular thing to say. I understand that there are people who are very elite, particularly like in media and in politics and in law, who will abuse their power in order to silence and shut down that sort of conversation. But, you know, doesn't that just circle back to then prove that people who have these concerns are correct? So, I don't know. It was a very interesting exchange. I still come away with it with the opinion that Faraday Speaks is probably just trolling, in which case, you know, Godspeed, keep on keeping on. I'm glad I was able to promote you in this way. But, you know, if what you were saying in your video, if it truly was something that you felt genuinely, and that you're really on this sort of a path to try to just, you know, figure out what's going on and have an honest opinion, first of all, I know that you watched my video response to you, and clearly you did not take my advice. You did not go to the heart of the situation, and you did not identify specifically what your arguments were, and you did not identify where your sources were. You didn't identify things down to the real nitty-gritty that you needed to. So if you want, you know, I'm somebody who has been listening to Molyneux for over a decade. The first Molyneux video I saw was in 2008, so it's been over 10 years of me watching and engaging with Molyneux's content. So I'm very, very familiar with him. I'm very comfortable saying that as well. So if you need help kind of digging something up and finding information on what he thinks, or finding context for what his ideas are, you know, I'm a great resource to you. So, you know, I still have my open invitation to you. If you want to have either a debate or a discussion, it doesn't need to be totally adversarial. I'm totally down for that. But, yeah, I mean, kind of got your shit pushed in, and you should have listened to me. You should have listened to me. Anyway, I hope that this was really interesting for people, and I hope that maybe there was a couple of things that you thought were maybe a little bit of food for thought. That's what I always hope happens when we have these sorts of videos. I always look forward to the comments, and everybody have a nice day.